There is a simple, powerful tool that can help you find more opportunities and navigate any situation with less stress and a greater sense of control. What is it? Reframing. Before you say, that's just putting a positive spin on an adverse event or situation, stay tuned. In this video, the fourth in our mini-series, The Employee's Guide to Thriving During Organizational Change, you'll discover what reframing is, what it is not, and 3 ways to use the technique to find stability and balance during any change. We live our lives through our stories. Even our personality is based on the stories we tell about ourselves, others tell about us, and our unconscious beliefs. Often the beliefs that were embedded early in our lives before we even knew we were embedding beliefs. In addition, our brain is a prediction machine. It craves certainty and predictability. All of this is part of our basic survival mechanisms. So when something disrupts our normal pattern, we unconsciously and automatically look to make sense of what is happening. And that means we're going to create a story. The problem is that initially it's our unconscious brain, our emotional response system that generates that story. And it does this by looking back. In a previous video, I talked about how the emotions we feel today are often based on past experiences and beliefs. I'll post that video in the show notes below. So that initial story, the one we create about any situation, whether it's the person who cut you off when you were driving to work, or your best friend who hasn't called you back in 2 days, or that job you did or didn't get, is often based on those old beliefs, on incomplete information, on assumptions, perceptions, and the meaning we give or you give to what your body is signaling. All of this is normal. However, if that initial story becomes the only story and your truth, you may experience increased stress and find it difficult to see alternatives and options, which then limits your decision-making capability and your capacity for navigating change. That's what happened with one 57-year-old employee I coached. He was scared and angry. The company was shutting down his division and he would be unemployed. This was the second time in 3 years that he had been downsized, and he had just re-entered the workforce after a 2-year absence to get his engineering certificate. He had developed a narrative that no one was going to hire him due to his age, his 2-year absence, and that he had been laid off twice in 3 years. On a scale of 1 to 10, his stress level was a 9. Reframing helped him de-escalate his stress and through it create an action plan that left him more in control. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. First, let's talk about what reframing is and what it is not. Reframing is a technique originally developed in cognitive behavioral therapy. Although initially designed as a therapy technique, it can be helpful for anyone. It involves disconnecting from one story and exploring alternative, more helpful stories. Reframing is not just about putting a positive spin on a situation or event. It's also not about denying or suppressing your emotions. Reframing is connecting with your emotions consciously to identify and challenge unhelpful thoughts that may be based on unvalidated assumptions and judgments or old beliefs and experiences, and explore alternatives for interpreting the situation. Reframing lets you reinterpret your emotional response and see other alternative stories that are more helpful. It also enables you to approach the problem or the situation with more options and a solution-focused mindset. I have found it to be one of the most powerful stress-reducing techniques. Here's how reframing helped my coaching client. First, we explored the situation objectively, asking what he knew for sure and what was only his interpretation of the situation and possible future events. Once we did that, he could see there were alternative perspectives. For example, it took courage and commitment to return to school at his age. It demonstrated his willingness and ability to learn new things. He also had a depth and breadth of experience that younger workers didn't have. As we explored these alternative perspectives, his stress level went from a 9 to a 4, and we could create an action plan, one that he felt confident about. I was so excited when I followed up with him a month later, and he had found a new job. Interestingly enough, he got the job for the very reasons he initially had thought he would never get hired. When things are uncertain during change, that initial story might not be helpful, and it can further destabilize you. And that's where reframing helps. Several years ago, I listened to Ellen DeGeneres interview Harrison Ford just after he'd had a fairly serious plane crash. What surprised Ellen and me was that when he realized he was going to crash, he went to a higher elevation. The higher elevation allowed him to see more options for landing the plane as safely as possible with minimal injury to himself and possibly damage to the plane. It's the same thing during change. Reframing allows you to disconnect from your automatic response and explore alternative views and perspective. It won't turn a negative into a positive, nor does it suggest that you overlook the reality of whatever the situation is. But rather than making decisions with your unconscious mind, you engage your prefrontal cortex, or that executive center of the brain, in the decision-making process. Reframing takes your emotional response system out of the driver's seat and puts your prefrontal cortex, or that executive center of your brain, in control. And it's only that area of the brain that can regulate your amygdala's emotional response and thus decrease the release of cortisol. In video number 2 of this series, I talked about how your stress response turns on automatically, but turning it off requires a manual process. Reframing is one of those processes. It can help you turn off, or at least turn down, your stress response. Reframing takes practice. It isn't always easy to disconnect from that original and automatic story. However, when you practice it regularly, you can develop new neural pathways and more quickly feel that sense of stability and balance. Lisa Feldman Barrett, author of How Emotions Are Made, says, tweaking your conceptual system and changing your predictions, you not only change your future experiences, you can change your sense of self. And that's what happened with my client. He created a new sense of who he was as this confident, experienced worker. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, remember to hit the like button. And if you haven't already, now would be the perfect time to subscribe and get notified when video number 5 in the series comes out. And if you're ready to explore, develop your change readiness, and would like to work with me one-on-one, I have a limited number of spaces for private coaching clients. Reach out. Let's have a conversation. I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.